I want to describe a morning. You wake up and it's already there before you have checked your phone also. Before the day has asked anything of you, a low diffuse dread sitting somewhere between your chest and your stomach with no clear address and no clear name. Nothing has happened yet. There is no immediate threat, and yet the body is already running the emergency response. Sometimes it has a direction, the appointment that is 3 weeks away, the conversation that is going to happen and keeps getting deferred, the test results that are coming, or could be the job situation that is uncertain, or the parent whose last call sounded different. Sometimes it is just sourceless, vague, and faithful. I don't even know what I'm anxious about. I'm just anxious. Some of you have been told you have an anxiety disorder. You have been given a diagnosis, possibly medication, or possibly a referral to a therapist. You do breathing exercise, you told to focus on the present, and you have tried meditation. And the anxiety is still there. Because what is happening is none of those interventions addressed what is actually underneath it. And you ask yourself that why isn't this working? Some of you may not have been formally diagnosed. You just live with a background static that other people don't seem to have. And you function well. You are in fact high functioning. The person everyone would describe as having it together, and yet inside I am waiting for something to go wrong. I can't relax. I don't know how to just relax. I am always preparing for the worst case scenario. And if any of that is your experience, this episode is for you. Welcome to episode 6 of the Soma Shadow podcast. I am Abhinav Sharma. So last week I retired the word stress. And this week I'm going to do the same for anxiety. Because anxiety is again not a condition, it's a specific thing. And once you see what it specifically is, you can work with it rather than manage it forever. So what anxiety actually is? Here's the definition. Anxiety is anticipatory fear, and that's the complete definition. Fear of something that has not happened yet. Fear living in the future and not in the present. Now, present fear has a job. Something is threatening you right now. The fear mobilizes you to respond. Remember the fight and flight? Now the signal is appropriate. A response is also proportionate when the fear is present. However, anticipatory fear, popularly called anxiety, usually has no immediate job. The thing that is being feared has not happened yet. It may never happen, but your body does not know that. The body responds to anticipatory fear in exactly the same way it responds to present danger. Same cortisol, adrenaline, heart rate elevation, muscle tension, shallow breathing, heightened vigilance, the whole emergency architecture for what is often imagined. Day after day, year after year, for what is imagined. The word anxiety hides this. It makes the fear of the future feel like a general condition of the personality rather than what it actually is. It's a specific fear pointing at a specific imagined outcome. So when you say I'm anxious, it tells the body nothing useful. But if you were to say I'm afraid that my test results will show that the disease has progressed, tells the body exactly what it's preparing for and gives you something you can actually work with. Now that specificity is the whole move, and we'll spend this episode finding it. Now I want to bring up two categories. These categories are basically Bach flower remedies, Mimulus and Aspen. Now Dr. Bach made a distinction that I find extremely useful. He identified two fundamentally different types of fears. The first is fear with a known object. It could be a fear of a specific thing, of say the appointment or the result or the conversation or a person, mostly known as phobias. Fear that if you name it has a clear address. Now the second fear is without a known object. It's diffuse, vague, cannot be pointed at. What are you afraid of? Now this fear is that free floating anxiety that attaches to different objects on different days and seems to belong to inner life rather than any particular cause. So the first category, mimless, is also the name of the remedy. It's for known fears that can be named. Remedy for the second, the vague, unnamed dread, that is aspen. Now I'm not going to tell you to go and take one of these. A point I want to make is that the distinction matters, and that maps onto a truth that I observe consistently. Anxiety that has a known but unnamed object responds differently to the naming practice than anxiety that is genuinely diffuse, rooted in the, you can say, nervous system's baseline, and there's no current object to be afraid of. Now, the first type, when you name what you are specifically afraid of, it tends to diminish. A body can work with something specific, it's intelligent. Now, the second type, when you try to name it but cannot, when the practice produces, I don't know, I'm just afraid. Now, this is usually the body speaking from its baseline rather than a current threat. And the baseline was set long before the present life. Now, this type of anxiety is not about what is going to happen now. It is about what the nervous system learned to expect from a very early experience. That the mother-in-law, when she came for the last time, she created a problem. So it's not happened yet, but you are afraid of that coming event. It's an experience. Similarly, my father, say you got less marks. The last time the dad beat me. So this time again, it's not happened yet, but you have started fearing it. So we'll come to what to do with that shortly. First, let me name the specific forms anxiety takes in people that I have seen. Different kinds of anxieties are health anxiety, performance, social, existential, and how do they connect to chronic illness. Now, let's take health anxiety. Most common in the audience of this podcast and the most understandable. So you have a chronic condition. The condition has educated your body to monitor itself. Monitoring is appropriate. You would be doing tests, some vigilance, don't eat this, don't eat that. But for many of my clients, it has become a continuous hyper-vigilance. What happens? Oh, that sensation in my chest, is that the medication? Is that the medication changing? My TSH was stable last time. What if it has shifted now? I felt better last week. This week I feel worse. What does that mean? Or every symptom becomes a potential emergency. The body that has been unwell learns to treat its own sensations as threats. It keeps you watching, researching, managing. It has become a source of its own distress. Now, the specific fear inside the health anxiety is almost always one of three things. That you are either afraid that the disease will progress, or you will not be able to catch it early enough, or that the fear that body will keep failing no matter what you do. A fear of losing control of the body that you live in. What if this is just my life now? Now, name that fear. It's the one that needs to be sat with. Coming to performance anxiety. Now, this is fear of being found inadequate at the time of visibility. It's not fear of the task itself. It can be fear of who will be watching, fear of what the watching means. And underneath, almost always, is the specific question, am I enough? Not in presentation or in meeting, but as a person. A presentation is a test, but the test is the question. The question that was posed much earlier than this boardroom or this stage. What if they see through me? Now, the person with performance anxiety is not usually incompetent. They are excellent because this fear has made them so. It's not about capability, it's about the distance between how they appear and how they feel. A person who performs competence while carrying a privately insufficient self-image. Now, it's a terror of that gap being exposed. Social anxiety, fear of being seen and found wanting. It's quite similar to performance, but there's a certain difference. It's not fear of social situations themselves, but of what others will see when they look at you, of what your presence will cost you in judgment. I will do something that will make this person or these people withdraw from me. Now, withdrawal in evolutionary terms from the group was death. The social threat and survival threat were once the same threat. The nervous system that learned that it was at risk of losing belonging, that the presence was conditional on performance, on not being too much, carries that threat forward into every new place. I don't know what to say. I said the wrong thing. They think I'm strange. Social anxiety is suppressed. No, taken to its logical end. The person who could not risk saying the wrong thing ever for anything different from acceptance felt existential. Now, this person monitors every syllable before it even comes out of the mouth. It's exhausting. The exhaustion is real, and the thyroid sitting at the throat, it registers every unreleased word. So, existential anxiety, now that is the fear with no object. And this is Aspen territory. It doesn't point at anything, or that seems to point at everything. It could be fear of death, of meaninglessness, of time running out, life not fully lived, fully enjoyed, or of having organized everything around survival and duty, and then waking up at 50 and asking, was this it? Is this all there is? I'm afraid of dying before I have actually lived. So existential anxiety is for a person who has been so occupied with functioning that they have had no time to ask what the functioning is for. The high functioning person with the diagnosis, performing wellness for years and privately knows that the performance is not the same as actually being well. This type of anxiety does not respond well to the naming practice alone, because you cannot name it. You cannot name the fear. It responds to a deeper question, that what would a life look like that this body or I was actually willing to live? It's not a quick question. It's the real one. So why the two so often travel together? If you have a thyroid condition, autoimmune or metabolic condition, and if you also have anxiety, significant, it's not a coincidence. Let me describe the connection as I understand it from observation and some research that I have read. The first connection is physiological. A nervous system that has been running on chronically elevated cortisol from years of unprocessed emotional experience. Now that baseline has raised. Now this produces persistent anxiety, not because something is wrong, but because the body's alarm system has been running so long at a high setting that it treats the current moment as threatening even when it's not. Second connection is psychological. Living with a chronic condition that feels uncontrollable trains the nervous system towards hypervigilance. You have learned biologically that your body can turn against you without warning, that the reports can come back first, that the next flare or the next bad result or the unexplained symptom. Now that is a rational response to what you have been going through, but it has just become its own problem. Third connection is the deepest one, the same pattern that underlies many chronic conditions. The chronic suppression, swallowed no, performed a yes, also underlines chronic anxiety. Somebody who has been taught that certain emotions were not safe to feel learns both to suppress them, to live in the anticipatory fear that they might surface anyway. Now suppression and anxiety again are the two sides of the same condition. Now you cannot manage the anxiety by treating it as a problem. That anxiety is the signal. It is pointing at suppression, and the suppression is what this work addresses. So let's do a naming practice for anxiety specifically. We did a naming practice in episode 5 on stress, which works here also. There is a certain adjustment needed for anxiety. So when you feel anxious, don't ask yourself that what I'm anxious about. It won't work. Ask instead what you got to ask. What specific outcome am I afraid of? Now you got to name the specific outcome. Once that is answered, then ask 3 more questions. Is this outcome actually coming, or am I treating something imagined as something that is imminent? And if it does come, what would I do? Because body will start calming slightly when it knows that there's an action available, even if it is an emergency one. And the deepest question for the anxiety that has no clear thing, this fear about the present, or is it a very old fear about a very old environment that has not yet been told that the environment has changed? Now this last question is the one that opens the door to deeper work. Now I want you to carry one question for this week with yourself. What is the oldest version of this anxiety? The first time you remember feeling it. Not the current situation, but the first time. You do not need to answer that immediately. Let it find its way to surface over the coming days. Now, old fears, when they are named and located in time, often lose some of their authority over the present. Next week, we go into one pattern that sits underneath both stress and anxiety, underneath all of the conditions that we have talked about across this series till now. This shadow, not as a metaphor, but as a biological address. If this episode named something, you can save it. If you are living with significant anxiety alongside a chronic condition, know this, that the anxiety is not separate from the condition. It's the same system speaking from the same root, and working at the root will change both. Thank you for being here.